All right, so for this video, I'm just gonna go through a little article that I read on, and just gonna go through some of the images and some of the data points. This is pretty much the title of it was the photogrammic facial analysis of attractive celebrities using the Gabella for planning rhinoplasty and analyzing surgical outcomes. Now, Cho Wo Park is the person who wrote the article, and it was done in VIP International Plastic Surgery Center in Seoul, Korea. All right. So this was pretty much a study of 80 celebrities, including Koreans, Southeast Asians, Japans, Chinese, and Americans, to pretty much understand what makes the face attractive. And pretty much they were just using it just to find what makes the person attractive. Now, although they had to go kind of like how I do, like online, because they couldn't really get these celebrities in person, obviously. And there might be kind of a few errors that they did talk about, because it's kind of tough to get the lateral or the side view profile of some of these celebrities. It does take a while to find a full side view profile of a celebrity's face and the right angles of their face as well. So they plan on redoing this whole thing again. And although the data says not that big because it's only 80 celebrities, and this is also men and women as well. And additionally, they also talk about the characteristics between the Asians and the Caucasians, or they call them Americans in this study. And the East Asians typically have different nasal characteristics compared to Caucasians, such as short camellas, wide nostrils, and they also have a broad nose tip and a low dorsal profile. So what that means as low dorsal profile is the nasal bridge is lower set, and while obviously the Americans have a higher set nasal bridge as well. And pretty much those are the main differences. Just the nasal tip and just having a broad nose and having a nose dorsal that is lower set to the face. All right. Now, what y'all see right here in front of y'all are just different points and or tangent lines, I guess you can say, tangent points. That this is going to be important for the measurements that you're going to see later. So I'm just going to go through some of them. So on the top, we have the Gabella right over here. And this is the most prominent point of the forehead, and it's the midline between the eyebrows. The next one is the nasion. Just follow the mouse if y'all can see it. And this is the midpoint of the junction of the frontal nasal structure. And this is going to meet with the nasal bridge as well. So this is where both points kind of meet together. All right. And then after that, we got the pronasal. And the pronasal is pretty much I guess you can say, the points or the highest point of the nose, or the most prominent point of the nose. So you just think of it like that, the most prominent point of a person's nose. And then after that, we have the camella, and that is typically known as the base of the nose. Usually I say that the camella kind of stops where the nasal or the nostril opening stops. So kind of like around this area right here. That's usually how usually on the internet, it usually is going to be centered around right here where the nostril ends at. All right. And then after that, we have the subnasal, which is this corner groove right here. This is the deepest point of this junction or of the base, and that of the camella and the upper lip. And that will be that kind of like that midline point. All right. And then after that, we have the labial superioris. I hope I'm saying it right. And that is pretty much the midpoint on the vermilion line of the upper lip. So that is going to be around this area right here of the upper lip. And then after that, we have the pogonion, which is the most prominent point of the chin. And yeah, so sometimes I usually get the pogonion and the pronasal mixed together for whatever reason that may be. All right. So what we have here is, I'm going to just kind of like explain what y'all see right here. So these are the amounts of people for each nationality that y'all see right here, it's all 80 people, by the way. Now, and these are the different countries that they're from. And we have the nasal frontal angle right here, the nasal angle, and I'm gonna show you guys the pictures as well, so y'all won't be confused. We have the nasolabial angle, the facial convexity, the total facial convexity. All right. Now, the facial convexity, I do want to explain because they did talk about that as well in this study. And for the facial convexity, they did not go from the nasion, they actually went from the glabella. The reason why was because they felt like, because a lot of these celebrities were about to receive rhinoplasty, and they felt like that could also change or affect the way that the nose may look. And obviously the nasion is right there to it. So instead they went to the glabella. All right, so let's look at the first one, the nasofrontal angle. And I'm going to show you guys a picture as well to refresh our memories. But I'm just going to show you the differences between the American and the others. All right, so we have the Koreans, which is 37. So the Koreans is the most in this data set. And then after that, we have the Chinese, which is only 10. This is kind of like a pretty small study, to be honest, but nevertheless, a study is a study. The Japanese is 8, which is the smallest. And then after that is the Southeast Asians. All right. And that is 14. And then we have the Americans at 11. All right. And we see the differences between all of them. And what I can see clearly is that the Americans have a more pronounced brow bone. All right. A more pronounced brow bone. Now, what this means is that, because usually when people have a lower set nasal dorsum or nasal bridge, they typically have a more tighter angle. But for the Asians, that's not the case. So what this means is that they have a brow bone, or a brow bone that is not that prominent. So the average Asian person's brow bone isn't going to be as prominent as the average Caucasian person's brow bone. But typically that would be a little bit different for Black people because they do have more of a pronounced brow bone. So let's just take a look at the picture so y'all can see it. All right, so these are the different pictures right here. And let's just look at the nasal frontal angle. So going from the glabella to the nasion, and then all the way to the pronasal. And the brow bossing is probably not as projected forward for the Asians. And so this makes the face look, I guess they call it nyani, so meaning baby-like features. So typically you want that prominent point of the forehead to kind of protrude out a little bit. It does make the face makes the face look more developed overall. All right. So obviously in the study, they also talk about the nasal angle, and they said that the Asians typically have a nasal angle that is less acute than the Caucasians, which I will look back at it. And this one is a little bit different from my nasal angle that I typically do. And for this nasal angle, what it went from is the nasion to the pronasal all the way to the camella. And when I do mine, I kind of do mine a little bit different than they do theirs. But it's still going to be somewhat similar if you know like the ratios and what to kind of like look for. But either way, let me just go back so I can see. And from the nasal angle, what we have here is the Koreans is at 112, the Chinese is at 108, the Japanese is at 110, and the Southeast Asians is at 112, and then the Americans is at 112 as well. So the Southeast Asians and the Americans got similar nasal angles. And then the Chinese actually have a more sharper nasal angle. And in this study, they said that they have more rounder nasal angles. I don't know why they came up with that conclusion, but obviously y'all can see something that's different. Even though this is a smaller study, But yeah, so but usually from what I've seen, from what I've done, I noticed that the Asians do have slightly more rounder nasal tips. All right. So the nasal labial angle, this is how much upturned your nose is. So what we have here is Koreans is at 97, Chinese is at 98. We have the Japanese at 96. Same thing for Southeast Asians. And then Americans is at 104. So this is probably one of the biggest distinctions between all of these other measurements. And I believe it is due to their forward, pretty much the prognatism, or just the overgrowth of the upper jaw, kind of extends forward a little bit. Asians, they do have noses that are upturned, generally speaking, and but still with that, the upper portion or the upper jaw can affect that angle, which it does. If it protrudes forward a little bit more, that will be the case. And I also do like an angle called the Z angle, which also identifies to see how projected your lips are. And like I usually say, Asians do have more lip projection than whites on average, not by a lot. So, but I'm kind of surprised to see that this angle is a little bit different. It's not too different, but it's just a little bit of a difference at 104. And for the others is around like 197 ish for the Asians. All right, so the facial convexity, let's see the picture real quick for that. And then for the facial convexity, I also said that it goes from the glabella. And for the facial convexity, I kind of expect it to be the same, only for this case. Now, I will say that Asians do lack forward maxillary growth, but that will be compensated by their foreheads not protruding forward. So that will kind of round out their facial convexity. So typically, if you have a flat maxilla, you're gonna have a flat facial convexity typically. But since they have a forehead that is kind of recessed, or that doesn't protrude forward, that's going to counterbalance it. So I'm going to see something that's a little bit similar to what the average white person might have. And as you can see, it's very, very similar. So Koreans, that's 168, and then Chinese 169, 170 for the Japanese, 169 for the Southeast Asians, and then Americans at 170. So very, very similar. Only two a 2-degree deviation, nothing too crazy. So that is not really surprising to me, honestly. But typically, I will say that Caucasians do have flatter. It's a little bit tricky. But I gotta look back at my data sheet to see that, but it's a little bit tricky on that side. But let's go to the next one. So total facial convexity. So total facial convexity is pretty much like the facial convexity. It's just that it adds the nose or the nasal protrusion. And for this one, I expect that the Caucasians might be a little bit more on the rounder side, but not too rounded. And let's see what we got here. So 142 for Koreans, Chinese is 141, Japanese is 145, Southeast Asians is 144, and then Americans is 142. So I was right, it is more rounder. And then the Chinese is actually just slightly more rounder, and the Koreans is actually the same as the Americans. So there's really no big difference. The only difference, honestly, with all of them is actually the nasal labial angle, which isn't really too surprising, but at the same time, I actually thought that the nasal angle was going to be completely different. And I wasn't really too surprised at the nasal frontal angle. That one didn't shock me either. So that's pretty much it. This is just a little quick study, and yeah, hopefully y'all like, subscribe, and comment down what y'all want to see next. And yeah, peace.